Episode 46 of 84 Feet with Cady and Cap. We are rolling along. It is Monday, February 24th. All the kiddies are back in school after a week off. And now we are getting into the trying times for the vehicle of Jeff Mlinar. It started last week, and now it's going to be full bore the next 3 weeks going on, all the way up through regional finals as he bounces back and forth between Section 2, Section 3, Section 5, Section 4, Section 1, a touch of North Country in there as well. Jeff Mlinar, Empire State Takeover. You know him. You love him. Welcome back, sir. I know particularly the last 4 or 5 days you were out west. Have you rested and recovered yet from your gallivanting out in the western part of the state?
No, but there's just not going to be rest and recovery. If you see me over the next 3 weeks, this is the reality of it, and this is every year. This isn't just a this year thing. So if you see me at some point over the next 3 weeks, leading up to between now and maybe like regional final weekend, understand if I'm struggling to string word groupings together and it's just sentence fragments that sound like I have a 4th grade education. I'm probably going to be running on an average of about 4 hours of sleep over the next 3 weeks.
Because I'm postseason zombie mode.
Yeah, last week was, I have my 2 trip meters. I reset one every day when I get in the car, and then I reset the other one Monday morning the first time I step in. Last week was about a 1,600-mile week. And this week, I've got trips to Poughkeepsie, Westchester County, Plattsburgh, Potsdam. It'll be another quadruple-digit week for sure.
Potsdam. Yum. So yeah, let's get right into it. Obviously, we got brackets to talk about, but before we get into that, there was some final week action to get into. The first game I have to jump into is the WAC Cup on Tuesday evening. So this was on the 18th. First off, a lot of craziness going on because of all the stupid weather that came through that prior weekend and early that week. So originally, there were going to be a ton of boys crossover games for the WAC Monday, and then girls consolation and both the girls and boys WAC Cup games Tuesday night, all at FMCC. Monday, obviously, all the weather, everything got postponed. We were assuming that we were going to move 4 of those boys crossover games into Tuesday, and then they were going to do the girls consolation game on campus and any other boys crossover games on campus on site at high schools. But then FM closed campus Tuesday morning, so scramble mode was initiated. They rescheduled a bunch of the boys games and got it down to having 2 boys crossover games and then the 2 title games at Cobleskill Richmondville High School. Before I get into the actual result of that girls WAC championship, I'm going to put this out there into the ether. I have nothing against the athletic director of Cobleskill Richmondville. I believe his name is Jeff. John Henry, I believe was his name. Nice guy, and but you can't have 2 rookies working scoreboard and shot clock on a night like that. Between the girls and boys title games, I can't explain how many times there were stoppages because either A, shot clock errors, or B, the scoreboard was wrong for some reason. And it was damaging to the flow of the game at times I even heard a rumor and conjecture during the boys' title game, which was last that night, that um, there's a possibility that not possibility that somebody observed somebody that is high up in the section two. How should I put this? The leadership, we'll call it. A regular that you'll see at Hudson Valley if you look at who's doing stats during all the Hudson Valley games. Uh, he observed that the game clock was not being stopped inside of a minute of regulation, which may have cost precious seconds for a potential. Uh, well, you'll understand when we break it down. Anyways, so the girls' game, BKW came out, established things quick. Haley Monroe was struggling to find her shot early on. She found it towards the end of the first quarter. Went into halftime. I believe it was like a one. It was a one possession game. I think it was even a 1 point game. Now that I think about it. Then BKW came out in a different defense in the third quarter. Locked down Haley Monroe, and she was essentially non-existent the entire third quarter, really. And in the fourth quarter, Northville just scratched and clawed their way back because BKW had like a consistent 7-8 point lead throughout that third quarter and into the early fourth, but Northville just fought and fought. Haley Monroe hits a corner three to take a 2 point lead with roughly, I think it was 27 seconds left, somewhere in that ballpark. And then they worked things down so that BKW had to figure out a sideline inbounds play with 4 seconds left. And Molly Shaver, the girl you've been preaching for a while now, Jeff, she knocks down the three with what was roughly probably a second and a half left-ish. And Northville just couldn't do anything. So BKW wins 44-43 over Northville. They win the WAC Cup. It was a wild night at CR, and yeah, I mean it helps to face a team twice in a season, and it serviced BKW this time around because obviously they put together a good game plan and they were able to get the job done.
Yeah, first off, this is one that I did not watch. I feel bad anytime that I miss the WAC Cup, like the WAC championship games. I missed it because just because of the changing of schedules. You know, my plan was to be at FM for this, and my plan would have been to be at Cobleskill if the third place girls game was not moved. So that was one of the casualties of that Tuesday. It was supposed to be a girls doubleheader at FM before the boys championship, with the third place being Cobleskill against OESJ, Oppenheim Euphrates St. Johnsville, and Northville Burn to follow. With the changing of the changing of the sites and the schedules, and OESJ is also the westernmost school in Section 2.
Right.
Yeah, that was the one as we had kind of the vicious lake effect stuff, especially the folks in Section 3 got to feel that firsthand. But OESJ is the closest Section 2 school to Section 3. That was the one that I worried about leading into it. Like, I wonder if OESJ is going to be able to pull this off. And they weren't able to secure the transportation to be able to play on that day. So, anyways, I missed it. Sounds like it was chaotic in lots of different ways. Yeah, it's Burn Northville. I think if they played a series best of 7, I think it's going 7. Like if you were to play this like an NBA, WNBA, whatever, best of 7, where one team hosts 2, the other team hosts 2, so on and so forth. I think it goes 7. I think both teams have considerable home court advantages on their floors. You bring it to a neutral site, it doesn't surprise me the game ends up like this. comparable athletes. Haley Monroe's the best player on the court between the two teams, generally speaking. But then if you were to go like play this like park basketball and just I get first pick, you get first ball, and you lay the Northville and Byrne teams out and you say pick your teams, Haley might be the first pick, but you're probably picking more Byrne kids in the first like 8 to 10 than you are Northville kids. Two very, very good coaches. So, things kind of line up to be a battle every single time. So sad I missed it. But schedule changed. So I pivoted and drove south instead of west and caught some things in the southern end of section 2 that I think we're gonna get to in down the road here.
Yeah.
Didn't watch it, don't even know if there was a stream. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Did see you bring up the sideline out of bounds, like Byrne winning the game on a sideline out of bounds play. I guess 2 thoughts, and one of them is going to be about Molly after this. But I'll say the Molly thing first. Yes, I've been high on Molly Shaver since the first time I watched her at this level a year ago at the WAC 3rd place game, and just for a young player, she was a varsity starter last year as a 7th grader. It's not like I'm not high on her because of physical tools and measurables. It's not like she's a 6'2" guard with that jumps out of the gym or anything. Kind of average size guard, height wise, well built physical frame for somebody her age. But I like her approach to the game. I like her style. She's even keeled sort of player for someone her age. Somebody that even as a middle schooler, without being there, you just say line up the Byrne team. Who do I want to take the last shot in the game? I'm down with it being Molly. I think that she's got the mental makeup to be to be strong in pressure moments. And when I've watched her play, it's again, never been too high, never been too low, just solid, doesn't get sped up, all assertive, not like over the top aggressive. But yeah, like I'm a Molly fan, and I've brought her up from time to time over the last year, whether it was last season's WAC Cup or at the beginning of this season. My first scrimmage I went to in November was at Byrne when they scrimmaged Waterfleet, and Molly was probably my biggest takeaway of that day. So when she was the one that hit the 3, yeah, I got to do a little bit of "I told you so" on social media and stuff like that. But good for her, good for Byrne, good for Coach Galvin, good for everybody that was there. Right? Sounds like a fun game. Sideline out of bounds play. It's funny you bring that up. That Byrne wins on a sideline out of bounds. I've said this kind of a lot over the last few years since the rules changed. Since New York has been an NCAA rules with some modifications state for many years. But when since the NCAA rules changed to go more the pro model, where you're able to advance the ball on a timeout in the last minute of regulation and ensuing overtimes if you didn't make an attempt to advance the ball on the change of possession. One of the people can have their feelings about it one way or the other, but the reality of it is before, like, I play and pretty much anybody, pretty much all of these coaches really, we all played in times where as far as out of bounds plays goes, the sideline out of bounds play was a pretty low priority thing to have. Baseline out of bounds was a much higher priority to be able to execute and generate certain kinds of action or have certain kinds of actions to generate certain looks or certain opportunities. And then your sideline out of bounds play, like, a lot of teams had a sideline out of bounds play. It was probably called sideline or sideline out of bounds, or it was a low priority thing to have. The shifting of the rules to be able to advance the ball really makes coaches, have to deepen their sideline out of bounds bag. And coaches that haven't done that have been left behind in the X and O world, of being able to generate shots for your players, because you need to have effective sideline out of bounds action if you want to be, like it's the key of playing from behind in the final minute of a game. I saw the highlight of that last play, and that was kind of an example of, I haven't talked to Coach Galvin. I don't know specifically what he was looking for off of that. It felt like it kind of got its desired effect, maybe not in the exact way. Like, that might have been a play where Molly was supposed to inbound it, because Molly was the inbounder, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
And then that might have been one where it was supposed to be a pitch back to the inbounder, but the person that she passed it to got pushed a little bit further out than she would have wanted. So Molly makes a little pivot, and instead of it being just, watch the inbounder and having be a pitch back, it turned into sliding onto the court a bit and a shallow cut in front to get back to that same area. But still, like, simple action, but in the final seconds of a basketball game, you get some movement, it gets its desired effect. And probably the shot that they were looking for without necessarily the exact movement they were looking for. Right shot. I'm all for trying to win that game in regulation, not trying to send it to overtime. I'm cool with that. And, being able to get that, and maybe that might have been also Molly pivoting a little bit off of, like, I got to get to this spot, but it's going to have to be kind of a different movement, a different cut. Good on everybody.
And I'll tell you this too. The main takeaway I had from that game was the growth of somebody that I got to see firsthand very early in the season when BKW visited Johnstown back in first week of December. And I hadn't seen BKW since firsthand until that WAC title game. Olivia Kirker has really grown into her own as a post player over the course of the season, and she was a dominant force that entire first half for BKW. Was really the difference maker into why the Bulldogs had such a hot start in that game. And if she's not taking advantage of the situation she had in the paint in that first half as much as she did, that game doesn't come close to the end result that we end up getting. Because she was just a dominant force. And if she wasn't making shots, she was getting offensive rebounds. She was getting offensive rebounds off other people's misses. Like, she made her presence felt in that first half to the point where Northville had to kind of do a reset button during that halftime and figure out a way to properly control her in the second half, which then obviously opened up things a little bit for the players to get a little more involved. Like Annie Lendrum kind of found her shot a little more in the second half. Bella DeGuilo was able to get involved a little bit more. So, but yeah, Kirker definitely impressed me just, from December to now. I mean, the improvement is definitely there, and definitely make things a little more interesting going into the C playoffs, because I think that's vitally important for BKW to have some kind of inside presence if they do want to compete, assuming they get to Hudson Valley, and more than likely, if you project forward, taking on a Stillwater team that has length and athleticism to them like they do. So, yeah, that definitely makes things a little more interesting going down the road.
Yeah, Kirker played pretty well back in January when I watched a regular season matchup against Northfield. Like in the sense that she made a difference for them. Only problem there was she got into some foul trouble. And I think that the foul trouble maybe limited her more than anything else did. When she was in, she gave them positive minutes. She made a difference for them back in the middle of the season. She's got such a size advantage over just how small that Northfield team is, that if she can make an impact just physically off of that, but then also when she gets the ball in her hands, nobody on that Northfield team can speed her up. She gets it around the rim. It's girls basketball. Like, yes, you'd love to be able to get open, like high quality open shots all the time. But I always say the higher level of basketball you get to, the lower likelihood it is that you're getting open shots. What you're really looking for is what I like to call make or miss shots. She's either going to make it or miss it. And the defense doesn't have a damn thing to do with it.
Yeah.
Defense can't do anything about it. She's either going to make it or she's going to miss it. That's it. That's one of those, like, she gets the ball around the rim against Northfield. It's kind of a make or miss. No 1-5-6 is really going to be able to make a big difference on that. And it's not necessarily what I'm thinking about when I say make or miss shots, but that is what it is for Byrne.
All right, so that pretty much covers. That was really all the action, all things considered, for classes C and D. So we'll move into Class B with their limited action last week, and that'll involve the two games that you went to that Tuesday. We'll start with the first one, Catskill and Ichabod Crane, a game where Ichabod made it interesting for a while there. Catskill eventually getting the win and capping off their season. What was it? 18-2, 19-1, something like that.
18-2.
18-2.
Lost
Yep.
Wallkill, lost Greenville. Yep.
Right. Finishing off 18-2 on the season. But Catskill able to get the win against Ichabod. What were your direct impressions coming out of that game, as far as what you made of Catskill, and then just all in all, the fact that they got challenged the way they did? I mean, obviously, you're taking on a team that's a Class A, but also
Rebuilding.
Yeah, rebuilding. That's exactly the word I was looking for.
They're rebuilding.
Yeah. So
And they have
what
pieces.
were your impressions?
They have pieces. I'm actually going to start with Ichabod because there's certain games, without having seen them, not just this year, but the last time I watched an Ichabod team, Carolina Williams was a rider. She wasn't going 20 for 20 from the line at Huzak or anything.
Right.
She was there. Ashley Ames was there. Delaney Moore was there. So it's been a couple years. So a couple of the results I know that we've touched on previous weeks of this have maybe been a little perplexing to me. Say when Ichabod beat Voorheesville, or when Ichabod keeps it close with somebody else. Like, wonder why. And then maybe they get torched by somebody. And there's kind of not necessarily an all over the place, but you never really have a good feel. I never had a good feel without being able to see them live. I get it now. It's a young group. Freshmen are primary players. I feel old because Maddie Graham is on the staff there. Maddie was a 7th grader my first year doing this, so that's about how old I feel now. Had a strong career at Ichabod. Graduated from there 2020. Played at Adelphi, Division II, Northeast 10. And now she's back on the staff at Ichabod, so that made me feel old. But and I'm getting there clearly. But yeah, it's a young group, freshman heavy. just spunky. Spunky's the right word, probably. That's they play with energy, play with effort. Uh, there's a little, not everybody on the team, but like there's a little bit of swag there. Um, there's just spunky group. This was the first time I got to see Ariana Henry, who's one of the freshmen that's put up decent numbers for him this year. This is a good. I think this is a good non-league matchup for Catskill to take, because even though she's younger, and this was a good experience for her going up against Ava Edmond, somebody that's a few years older and that's just kind of a little more consistent in her possession by possession approach around the rim. Ariana Henry is a remarkable athlete. It's a name that isn't known in Section 2 yet, unless maybe if you're like a track person, because I want to say she's might already be like a state champion in track in some way, shape, or form, but or at least somebody said that to me. So I didn't spend the 15 seconds to do any additional research on it, but like big time front court athlete, somebody that can match up athletically one-on-one with Ava. So I think it was a good matchup for Catskill to take. Ariana's got a lot of upside. She keeps the basketball in her hands. Is around people that will help her develop, and all of that. Like, there's potential is the dreaded P word of the game of basketball. There's way too many people that sit on potential and think that means that they actually made it somewhere. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of upside there. So spunky team, one to maybe look out for in years to come, depending on how some of these kids develop. Catskill, out of the Class B teams, just seems to be the one that they grind out, figure out ways to win. At the end of the day, it's not always pretty. As a matter of fact, it rarely is. But this was another one. They had Ava, they had Alessia Salerno, but they did not have everybody. They were missing a couple starters. I think they had a couple kids that were JV players that got minutes for them in this game. It was, all of my favorite words: a grind, a rock fight, a slog. Just put them all into one. But they just found ways. It felt like a game that it was just waiting for somebody to take it and say that it was theirs. And I don't think anybody really did. And what that turned into was just Catskills just got to get stops, or both teams really, but Catskills just got to get stops, stop after stop after stop, which they did. It was, they figure out ways to win. And I think we can talk about their strength of schedule or the patroon or whatever all we want, and I'm usually the loudest one about strength of schedule, but there's value to be, there's value that can be understated about just the winning experience and figuring out ways to win on any given day. So that was Valatia for you.
And then afterwards, you headed on down to Coxsackie, Athens, and what was the beginning of what turned out to be a rough week for Coxsackie, Athens. We won't necessarily touch on the Stillwater game from Thursday, but the Tuesday game you saw, they hosted Malone Franklin Academy out of the North Country, and a tale of two halves. Coxsackie, Athens held a 2-point lead, 24-22 at the half, but then Malone Franklin Academy, I don't know if coach had them running through a wall coming out of the locker room, or if if they took some of Michael's magic stuff, if you are familiar with the movie Space Jam. Um, but they come out of the locker room and just put it on Coxsackie Athens. Eventually, Malone Franklin Academy winning 69-43. What was the biggest difference in that change from the first half to the second half in your mind?
Malone saw the ball go in.
Mm.
It was a slow start. It was just Malone saw the ball go in a couple times before the locker room. That's so a couple things. Since this is we get listeners from outside Section 2, but this is primarily like a Section 2 thing. So a couple things going into it. Malone, Section 10, Class A school. There's only 2 A's up there, Malone and Messina. The high school name is Franklin Academy. I always get this question not just when it comes to them, but when it comes to anybody who's got the name Academy in their school. So I'll just get this out of the way. This is a public school that they played. I've had 3 people ask me at least whether they were public or private. There's a public schools, Malone High School. I know we think when we hear the word academy, we think of Albany Academy, which is private. But most of the time when you hear academy up in upstate New York, it's a public school. Franklin Academy in Malone, public. Lowville Academy, Lowville, public. Canandaigua Academy, Canandaigua is public. So public school section 10, Class A. This is I've time stamped myself several times doing this over the course of the winter. This is my 11th year doing this. Malone's team this year is without question the best Class A representative Section 10's had in my time doing this. Usually it's just they only have the 2 A's usually, or pardon me, this year it's 3 A's. It's Malone, Messina, Governor. It's always been Malone and Messina in the past. They've been A. Nobody else has been A. Governor moved up to A this year. It's actually going to be Malone against Governor in the championship, but in the Section 10 championship. But usually it's just one of those 2 makes it out and they get drubbed by either 3 or 2 or whatever. If Malone plays like they did in the first half against Coxsackie, they will get drubbed by the Section 3 champion in sub-regionals, which favorite is Utica Notre Dame, could potentially be, like James will do it, but the favorite's Notre Dame. If they play the way they did in the second half, just so you know what Coxsackie went up against, the second half version of Malone, which is not an anomaly, it's something that they have done a lot this year. The second half version deserves to have a seat at the table with Albany Academy, with Notre Dame, with Pittsford Sutherland, with Williamsville South, and Iroquois, and Hendrick Hudson, and Pearl River, and all of the other best A's in the state. They're that good when things click. So I think, okay, so I'm going to tweak my answer to the question you asked 5 minutes ago. I've been rambling ever since. I think the biggest difference was Malone plays Section 10 basketball. They did what they could to try and boost their schedule, including making a 230-mile drive down here to play Coxsackie on a Tuesday. They do whatever, right? But it is what it is. They're just not used to seeing a stronger athlete. The Section 10 basketball athlete outside of, there are individuals, right? The Ava Howies and Landry Kenyons that you saw last year, and Allie Bells and Lisbon, and Addie Foster's, Edwards Knox. So like there's individuals, but from a team standpoint, it's tough. It's just tough to get a competitive game. So they came down. Kosaki, they're competitive level athletes with them, and it took them. Even though you've got kids on this Malone team that are hoopers, they play AAU. They've been to Spooky Nook and Atlantic City and Louisville. They've done the live period stuff. They've done my stuff. But it just takes a while to get reacclimated to playing against like real basketball athletes. So they got held to 5 points in the first quarter. Not only was it 24-22 at half, Malone was down 24-14 with under 2 minutes left in the first half. And they ended the half on an 8-0 spurt. Reagan McCardle hits back-to-back threes. And this is sometimes the struggle of going up against a team that you don't really know. Right? Like you don't know until you know.
Right.
And Malone's got 3 kids that can legitimately play. 3 solid Division III kids. The best one was Olivia Simser. Like their top dog, who's arguably the top dog in Section 10, is Olivia Simser. Wore number 4, plays point guard for them, but big time scorer, kind of crafty off the dribble, changes speeds, all that. Struggled with the shot in the first half. So McCardle hits a couple threes late in the first half. Kosaki comes out defensively. They key in on her, on McCardle. And Simser got off. Liv, high-level player. She committed to Houghton, and she's going to be in the mix for immediate minutes in the backcourt at Houghton next year. But yeah, she got off. Like she not only did she get the opportunity to feel some space and get a little bit of a rhythm, it was also like that. It was like the Jordan meme. Like it's the first time that it's the first time that in her life that she's been on a team that somebody got boxed and it wasn't her. And I think she got offended by it. Where it's like, wait, what about me? Me? I'm here. And she had a 18 in the second half. Created for everybody, there's more aggressive, created for everybody else. Probably a handful of assists, got paint touches consistently. So, by that point, it wasn't that Kosaki stuck in the box for the whole second half. They did for a couple minutes and then tried something else, and then they matched up. But it was just the onslaught was on by that point. Malone scored 14 points in the first 14 minutes of the game. They scored 55 in the last 18. And it wasn't just a bunch of like steal run out layups. It's half court drive, baseline drive score, 3, transition 3, steal layup, half court kick out 3. It was a bit of everything post work. They've got a big Olivia Roberts that's going to staying local, going to Canton next year to play. So it's a good group. I mean, that's just it was a good battle. It took a while. Kosaki, I think, had them on their heels for a good amount of the first half. But when Malone got into a rhythm, got comfortable, you kind of saw the best version of them. And the best version of them is Albany Academy level. It's Notre Dame level. They're that good. Or maybe not quite that level, but at that table.
And just a little forward thinking, assuming they come out of Section 10, they'll have a sub-regional game at against the Section 3 champions at Liverpool High School. And then the winner of that 3-10 sub-regional takes on the winner of the 2-7 sub-regional at Hudson Valley. It'll be, 2 weeks from this Saturday? Yeah, so...
Yep.
Yeah, Saturday the 15th, I believe that is. So,
yes.
So yeah, that'll be might get a chance to see Malone down here again before we even get to the state championship tournament, if and when that happens. As far as Class A is concerned, not a whole. I mean, there was one game that involved, a higher up in Class A, Chalmont. They won their last league game against LaSalle on Tuesday, but in the grand scheme of things, as we'll show you in a little bit, didn't really mean much of anything to LaSalle or Chalmont in their respective brackets. And then BP, because of the weather, they're supposed to go out and play Central Valley. But what happened was Central Valley also had a league game scheduled the night before, which got postponed due to the lake effect weather that was coming through. So the league game took, higher precedence.
Yeah, took precedence there to reschedule that.
Non-league, so BP got stuck losing that last game on their schedule. So,
which I wish I knew that, I knew it as it was happening, but it was just so last minute, because if I had any inkling that was going to happen, Malone, I would have. My first call would have been to Casey Russum. I would have done everything I could to set up Malone against BP the day after.
Yeah.
Malone, Koksaki, because Malone only had. They didn't just need one. They had 16 games on their schedule.
Yeah.
So I was trying to fill.
Right.
But I would have loved to see Malone BP.
Two more games I want to touch on from last week before we start diving into the brackets that came out on Friday. First off, Averill Park, they get a nice win at Shenandoah to close out their season back on Tuesday. Kaylee Ahern getting limited minutes in her first game back, and I think it's been close to a month at this point.
About 4 weeks.
Correctly. So Kaylee's back, got limited minutes. This is something they have been ramping up to, anyways, because like we mentioned last week, she was in uniform for that Colony game and went through pregame warmups with the team that night. So we knew it was coming. It was just a matter of if it happened in that Shen game or if her first game minutes came in the sectional quarterfinals. Turns out it came last week. And in the end, part of that game being the surprise that Eric Wolleber, Lily's father, refused to tell me what was going on at the Colony game because one of the coaches asked Eric at one point how many that was for Ari. Ariana Verardi needed 7 points apparently to get to 1,000 at Shen. Got there. She ended up finishing, I think, with somewhere around 20, if I remember correctly. So Ariana Verardi, newest 1,000-point career club member for the Averill Park girls basketball team. So yeah, all in all, that's a really good win for Coach Organ and his squad, and just for a lot of different things, for confidence going into sectionals, for getting the sea legs under Kaylee Ahern, because practice a completely different animal from actual game time. And Coach Organ warned might be a little bit of a strong word, but he gave off the impression that, hey, if all these nagging injuries can stop and Kaylee comes back being Kaylee off this foot injury, watch out for us. That was the warning he gave me at the Colony game. And hey, if they can come out and do to Shen, if they can do that continuously through double A's, who's to doubt them at that point?
This is again without me being at the game, because just like everything else, it was good in Section 2. It was on Tuesday at like 4:00. So I catch that end of season AP Shen game, but with so much going on, I ended up not. So I can't say for a fact exactly how we got to this number. But this is the striking thing for me. what have I, going back from the beginning of the season all the way up to now, what's the thing that I've kind of hit on as far as Averill Park? Their there's whether it's struggles or inability or um, the difference between this year's team and the teams of recent years, how this is more like a late 2010s team for them, that um, being able to manufacture enough offense to beat the top teams was a big thing for them. Whereas, everything, this is a sort of team that's a grind, like 40s, low 50s. I even think I threw the number 52 on here at one. Like, that's been kind of the arbitrary number I've had. It was like 52 is that number they kind of have to hold teams under. Or that they struggle to get past against good teams. And looking at some of their scores leading in over the course of the season, early season when the time that they beat Columbia, it was 50-48, and then they lost CNS 50-46, which I think was in overtime, and they beat Lords, it was 46-40, and they lost to Shen, it was 56-52, but there was they were down 15 and had a furious rally in the last few minutes. The Columbia game was kind of the anomaly, and they lost 72-54. They've played Colony twice. They lost 54-47 in overtime. They lost 48-39. The Albany game was 51-46. We kind of have like a similar numerical range here. And then against Shen, they hang 37 in the first half, and they score 62. Looky here. I can't say specifically again exactly how they got to that number. Was it creating a bunch of turnovers and getting out in transition? Was it pounding the offensive glass and getting second chance opportunities, or were things just a little more crisp? But Averill Park beating Shen at Shen should put AA on the other AA powers on some level of notice. But them getting in the 60s in regulation should really put people on notice. Because now if we're saying that they're at a point where things are clicking enough offensively that they're manufacturing enough to get to that number that starts with a 6 instead of just creeping into that number that starts with a 5. That's to me, that's the difference. That's the difference between any given night they can grind their way to a win against another strong team, and they can just flat out beat you, however, whatever sort of style. So that was the biggest thing that I noticed. It wasn't even the fact that they beat Shen. Okay, that can happen. They got in the 60s. Okay, I'm listening.
And then finally in AAA, Goodland gets a non-league win at Queensbury, which obviously didn't do anything for their sectional scene because that was all AAA was basically all laid out by the standings of the Suburban Council in the end. But still a quality win to get going into sectional play. But the main AAA game I wanted to focus on was Shaker going down to Pine Bush on the last full day of the regular season last Thursday. And they beat a fellow state-ranked team in Pine Bush 63-54. Hey, Shaker decided instead of, just doing a scrimmage or filling with somebody, it might not necessarily be a challenge to them. They decided, hey, not only are we going to challenge ourselves, we're going to go to their place and challenge ourselves, and came away with a victory. So good on them for doing that. And put themselves in a position where, it's going to be hard to deny them, particularly with you and your upstate 20. It's going to be hard to deny them being considered for top billing down the road very soon.
Yeah, no, Pine Bush is an interesting matchup for them because the one thing that I've watched Pine Bush twice in person this year, and the one thing that Pine Bush does that very few teams can do is match up physically with Shaker. It's a big, athletic, grind you down, wear you to the bone sort of group. So it's an interesting sort of matchup where that's what Shake. There's we've got some size in Section 2, and we've got some athletic teams, and we've whatever, but nobody physical tools and measurables and strength, all of that can really match up with Shaker locally for 32 minutes. That's what Pine Bush does to every team in Section 9. So interesting matchup. Yeah, credit to them for saying, "Hey, let's take this one on the road." The just different environment. It's an odd bus ride getting to Pine Bush. Officiating can be different in Section 9. It isn't always different. But as far as officiating goes in Section 9, I don't know what I'm getting until I walk in and see who's on the game. Because you got some that are going to let you rock, and then you got some that are going to call it very literal interpretation. So don't really, don't really know what you're getting. So there's a lot of different factors at play. Pine Bush is a smaller gym, so that's one of those. If you get 200 people in there, or 100, maybe not even 200, you got 150 people in there, it could feel like a ruckus sort of road environment. So, good win for them. Close out the season. Get used to that bus ride, because I think if Shaker makes it out of Section 2, or whoever makes it out of Section 2, gets to take the bus ride to Syracuse for regionals.
Correct.
So get used to that. Get a little experience with it. So I think their longest. Well, Shaker went down to Brooklyn,
right?
But I don't know if that might have been like that might have been a little more of a cushy bus ride. A little more leg room.
Right.
No, but yeah, good win for them to close out the season for sure.
One thing I want to bring up, totally not off brand necessarily, but off topic from Section 2. I do want to acknowledge one career achievement that happened this past week. Mallory Heiss from Hilton out in Section 5, Class AA. Already the career scoring leader in Hilton High School history. Already committed to St. Bonaventure for the fall. She eclipsed the 2,000 point mark for her career this past week. I know this is somebody that you are a tremendous fan of. You've had at your showcases. Somebody that you couldn't gloat about enough for me when they were coming into states last March originally. Just talk a little bit about Mallory for those of us that are not familiar with Section 5 all that much, or maybe didn't get a chance to catch her when she played at Hudson Valley last year. Just talk to us a little bit about Mallory and what she brings to the court, and what she means to that Hilton squad.
Mallory is like Mallory is the benchmark for what I wish everybody was in life. Um, thankfully, I've been able to know her and know the family and even have her involved in my stuff since oh God, seventh grade. I think she came out to Schenectady High School for something I ran seventh grade. So it's been a while, but just this sounds cliche, but the kid does Mallory does everything the right way. Like there isn't a thing that Mallory doesn't do the right way. I know that I said a lot of glowing things about her to you going into Hudson Valley last year. I think I said this to Coach Oregon. We were talking about Hilton a little bit, and the way I describe Mallory, and those that are locals will understand this. Like she's the ultimate organ player. It just so happens they had to play against each other in state semis last year, but that's the ultimate organ kid. Uh, I may have said, I don't remember if I said it to him or if I said it to Mark Bubniak, or both of them, but that's she's she's very steady, solid, general-ish in her approach to the game. Um, she's left no stone unturned, and like I think that Mallory's biggest goal is there's all these milestones that she's achieved, and accolades and the recruitment, and she had a few Division I offers before ultimately committing to St. Bonaventure, which I think is a great fit. Like she's an ultimate, how I said she's an ultimate Oregon kid. She's also an ultimate Jim Crowley kid at Bonaventure. Like that is, um, very. I'm bringing up blast from the past names, but somebody that I think maybe played at Hudson Valley with States in the past as well. Those are familiar with some out of area from the past, like Mariah Ruff from Oneonta, that was a big time point guard at St. Bonaventure. Like she's kind of a cut from that sort of cloth. Anybody around here there might be a little bit more familiarity with this name, Jackie Pittick.
Mm-hmm.
South Jefferson also made it to Hudson Valley with their South Jeff team and is now the starting point guard at Marist. Jackie, I always put in like the highest regard as a player. And there was a day for my summer run out in Rochester going into Jackie's senior year and Mal's freshman year that I had them both there. And I made it a point to introduce those two to each other, where I was like, Jackie, I know that I've said that nobody will ever compare to you. Okay, I got one. And that's fitting because they're all cut from that same sort of cloth. But going back, like there's all these milestones and accolades and the recruitment and everything. I think Mallory's biggest goal, like her number one supersedes all things goal in basketball, is to just be as good as she can possibly be. And then all the other stuff comes in, all the other stuff can come along with it. But it's just do everything right. Again, no stone unturned. Don't skip a workout. Don't cheat a single rep. Eat the right way. Sleep the right amount. Hydrate the right amount. Like all that sort of stuff. Just I just want to be as good at this as I can possibly be, as much as my body can give me. And all the other stuff just comes with it. Anything that you would look at where she was younger, where you would say that was maybe a knock on her game, not only has she taken those away, she's turned them into strengths. Strong, but maybe not fast off the bounce, She gets to her spots now. She's always had, if anyone that's watched her, it's kind of, especially with women's basketball, it's a signature high release. It's kind of, I hate to use this term, but it's like a guy's release where it's up, it's a wrist heavy, up above the head sort of shot. When she was young, it's been like that forever. When she was younger, she wasn't really a 3-point shooter. She didn't have the strength to be able to shoot that way from 20, 22 feet. She was a very good mid-range shooter. And I would always hear that about her not being able to shoot the three. Well, she's in these 35, 38-point games that she's putting up at Hilton, even though she doesn't necessarily want to be a 35-point scorer. It's just that she knows that's what she needs to be. She, at this level with the group that she has this year, with these 35, 38, 40-point games, 5 threes, 6 threes, 7 threes. So she's everything that you would use as a knock against her. She's improved. She's turned it into strengths. Tough, physically tough, mentally tough. Just and great kid, great family. I couldn't say enough. I'm not supposed to play favorites, but whatever. Like, she's one of my absolute favorites out of anybody that I've had a chance of getting to know and be around. That's when she got her last one. I think what I had posted some on one form of social media. That's we've got a running thing of love for trail mix, and she's and it's turned more recently. It's turned into her love of the M&Ms that's in the trail that are in the trail mix and just skipping around everything else. And I think I said Mallory and Milestones, the M&Ms and the trail mix of the game of basketball. But yeah, just a great kid. Couldn't be happier for her for all of her successes, and she's led a Hilton team to the majority of her running mates graduated last year. So she's not like totally on an island, but it's they win. It's got to be a lot to do with her, and she's led them to, well, hell, like who knows? As far as Section 5 Class AA is very good. Hilton, Aquinas is loaded. Bishop Kearney, Webster Schrader, Penfield has really turned the corner. But she's led them to shoot. We'll see.
So I found the exact tweet that you were referencing. You said Mallory and Milestones like the M&Ms and the trail mix of basketball.
Yeah, that's
there it is. Pretty cool.
Yeah, you're probably eating trail mix somewhere right now.
All right, let's dive into the brackets that came out back on Friday. If by any means you didn't catch the bracket release party from back on Friday, just go back to our YouTube page, and it's uploaded right there for your after the fact viewing. But right now, we'll just blow through two classes pretty quick because it was all self-explanatory. We knew the layout of Class D basically just because of the way things had all played out throughout the season. AAA, they pretty much followed the Suburban Council standings. So we'll just blow through those real quick. So let's pull up and look at Class D real quick. So we have Northville as the 1 seed, which we knew was going to be the case, especially considering they had the win in hand over Hartford. And just in general, just the way they've been playing throughout the season, that they were going to be the one. They'll take on the winner of the quarterfinal game between number 4 seed Argyle and number 5 Salem. That quarterfinal takes place on Thursday. Meanwhile, on the bottom half of the bracket, Hartford is your 2 seed. As I do this right here, Hartford the 2 seed, so they'll get a bye into the semis, taking on the winner of the 3-6 matchup, Saratoga Catholic. They'll host Germantown Thursday, and then both those semifinals, as you can see, are this coming Sunday night, starting at 6 p.m. with the Hartford game, and then 7:30 the nightcap will be the Northville game here up top. Um, the assumption being that it's pretty much Northville and then fill in the blank as to whoever comes out of the other side of the bracket. I'm assuming that thought has not changed for you, Jeff, in that regard. Have you given any more thought about the way things could match up if it comes out Hartford and Spa Catholic on the other side?
I'm looking forward to seeing it on Sunday night. So I mentioned this to you off air, but over the next 3 weeks, my current plans are to do sorry, but very, very little Section 2. I'm going to be driving all over God's creation over the next 2 or 3 weeks with sectionals and regional play. And I'll miss, there's certain classes that we're talking about that I will probably not see any of their stuff. Like I might not see a single ounce of Class B or Class C basketball with Section 2 playoffs. But the D's, I'm looking forward to, and it's not because I don't want to watch them, it's just because of how the schedule worked out. But D's, I'm looking forward to getting back in town to see that Hartford Spa Catholic game on Sunday. I'm curious how that's going to work out. We've mentioned this a few times, but they did see each other early in the season. They scheduled that as a non-league game. Hartford won on their home court. Strong first half, carried it to a 62-50 win. Now we get to see, that was month 1. This is now month 4. And we'll see what their paths have, where their development has taken them as far as their paths through this winter. Has the Wazrin League schedule of bumping up against Greenwich twice and Stillwater twice and Mechanicville and Tamarack and having games like the Wazrin for Spa Catholic has been, you get a few games that you get your head busted in. You get a few games that you're able to kind of put it on somebody. And then you get a few games that are competitive. And that would, were they able to take those competitive, basically, was that the right formula for them? Because to me, that doesn't sound like a bad formula to get better over the course of a season. You get a few of those games, you beat up on somebody, and you're able to gain a little confidence. Maybe your complementary players are able to gain a little bit of confidence. You get those competitive games where really you're able to get that late game experience and it more clearly defines roles. And then you get a few games that you get your heads busted in, but if you compete for 32 minutes, like if you try for 32 minutes, you don't roll over and play dead, then you're able to, maybe get a little more acclimated to that pace, that level of athlete. And does that bring you up a notch? So, we'll see. I'm curious as to how they look as far as pace and style of play on a 94-foot court compared to what it was, say, in early December.
And then the move over to Class AAA, like I mentioned, pretty much laid out based on Suburban Council standings. Again, just 6 schools here, as we had Schenectady opt out of sectionals for Class AAA. So 6 schools. Shaker and Colony ended up getting the byes as the 1 and 2 seeds. As far as the top half of the bracket, Shaker, they are off until next Friday, the 7th of March. Obviously, they'll probably arrange a scrimmage or 2 with somebody. But the game they'll feed into that will be Wednesday night at Shen, as they're the 4 seed hosting Goodland. And then the bottom half, Colony's half of the bracket, the 3-6 they'll feed into their semifinal is Albany hosting Saratoga also on Wednesday. And this is something that we had discussed beforehand, because since we knew how the top four were going to break down based on the Suburban Council standings, I'm assuming you still stand by that. You think the respective top two seeds would prefer if the 3 and 4 were switched on a matchup basis. You still stand by that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if they would prefer it because I assume that their opinion is, hey, we got to beat these teams anyways, so it's kind of throw them in a pot and see what happens. But I do stand by. I think Shen is the trickier between Shen and Albany. I think Shen is the trickier matchup for Shaker, and I think Albany is the trickier matchup for Colony, which sets the stage for potentially weird stuff happening, and it makes that that Friday night, March 7th, like that's the show in town. If you're assuming that well, not putting the cart before the horse, assuming that Albany beats Toga and Shen beats Gilderland, conventional wisdom would say that that's the case, but top four seeds make it. That, like, if you're not there, then what are you doing? You better be there. That better be a packed house. I mean, even at Hudson Valley, like that better be. You remember the crowds a couple of years ago when Albany was good, like Albany was like top of the section, and you had that Albany Colony semifinal with the DJ that came in and.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. You remember that?
Yep.
Like that place was. Like that place had more people in it than you see in state championships, unless Averill Park makes it. And Hudson Valley better have a nice crowd on Friday night, March 7th. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I do think that the way that the matchups shake out, Shen causes problems for Shaker. That was made very loud and clear when they played at Shen a few weeks ago. Shen sputtered a little bit in the last couple weeks, but they've got a little time to, I don't think that, like, being a quarterfinal game, having that game might not be the worst thing for Shen because they have, the Averill Park game and the Albany game, whatever, they have sputtered a little bit on the back end. So get one, try and get a good game, like try and get a strong 32 minutes out of this and build off of it.
And no excuse can be used for parents being split up between having a daughter on a girls team and a boy on the boys side, because the boys are off that Friday night. Just by sheer coincidence, there are no games at all in the boys tournament, any of the boys tournaments that night, because all the semifinals are going to be done by that Thursday, and then they're taking Friday night off before having their finals on two of them on Saturday night, the 7th, and Saturday the 8th, excuse me, on Saturday night the 8th after the girls have 4, and then they're using all day Sunday for the other 4 boys finals at Hudson Valley. So, like you said, literally zero excuse if you're not at those AAA semifinals. All right, let's go down to C. Again, a case where we knew the top 2 seeds. Was a matter of figuring out things after the fact. Let's focus on this top half of the bracket real quick. Greenwich the 1, because OBS 20-0. The only team relatively close to them in Section 2, Stillwater. They beat twice by the exact same score. So, I think it was a 20-point deficit, if I remember correctly, from those 2 games. Yeah, so they're the 1. They'll be hosting Gibbons tomorrow night in the round of 16. All these round of 16 games, by the way, are tomorrow night, the 25th of February. at the higher seeds gymnasium. The 8-9 Lake George will host Mayfield, and what could be a tricky matchup because Mayfield they got some players, a few shooters, that could play. It can be interesting, especially with Lake George. It's gonna be interesting to see how much they keep the focus on Micah Collier Fisher and Madison Brennan being the two standouts, or if they will get contributions elsewhere. The 4-13 OESJ will host Hoosick Valley, and then finally the 5-12 to wrap up the top half of that bracket. Maple Hill, they end up getting the 5 seed. A school I know that we were one of the few seeds where we were just kind of tossing up the air as to not being exactly sure where they were going to land. They get the 5. They will host number 12 seed Cambridge. Anything about that half of the bracket that pops out to you? Surprises you? Anything like that?
Not really. Maple Hill is a dangerous group just because I've kind of brought this up before. They have talent, they have pieces. They also haven't clicked. But if you get them on the wrong night, they can ruin your season. Unfortunately for them, they are on Greenwich's side of the bracket. So I think the reality is, even if they do click on a Greenwich night, that's just not to me, that's just not a doable one for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I look at them and that's not me saying anything about OESJ, but that's, they click on a certain night. They can be anyone's nightmare for the next 8 months, probably outside of Greenwich.
And I agree, talent wise, that's how it speaks to Maple Hill. But as somebody who got to see OESJ a couple of times this year, just because of the fact that I live out in Western Athletic Conference territory and actually announced at Johnstown this year, people probably going to look at that and be like, wow, how OESJ the 4? Like, really? Listen, they may not be very deep. They only have a roster, I think, of 8 or 9 deep, to be quite frank. If I remember correctly, it's only 8 or 9 deep. But they are a very hard-nosed, gritty team on defense. And if you're not matching their intensity, they will force turnovers and they will get out in transition. And they do have complementary pieces. They have a couple shooters. They have a couple of post players that can, get down and dirty in the paint. So it's a balanced team that's gritty, and seating wise, it wouldn't be an upset. In public perception, it might be an upset. But if OESJ did come out and beat Maple Hill in those quarterfinals, especially since they're technically going to be on a neutral court, assuming all things equal and Greenwich holds court tomorrow night, they'll be playing at Greenwich. I mean, it really would not shock me just because I know OESJ a little more than John Q Section 2 fan out there. So just from seeing both teams, see them up close and personal, an OESJ over Maple Hill victory, not only would it not be a seeding upset, it wouldn't be an upset in my mind either, talent-wise, to be quite frank.
No, it wouldn't be a surprise. It would that one. I mean, that's a 4-5. Like that matchup is what a 4-5 should be.
Right.
What you look for, and realistically, it's a team that OESJ is a team that I think they are the higher seed because of what they have done compared to Maple Hill, and they have done what they have done compared to Maple Hill because I think that they have done a better job coming close to maximizing what they can be.
And then going to the bottom half of the bracket, the number 2 seed being Stillwater, as we finish up the schedule for the round of 16 tomorrow night. They'll host number 15, McKeel Christian. The 7-10 will be Galway hosting Warrensburg. followed by your WAC Cup champions BKW, the Bulldogs. They're the 3 seed. They'll host Waterford, and then finally rounding things out, the 6-11 Whitehall and Dwaynesburg out of the WAC. So, all in all, I mean, I really don't see any complaints you could offer here as far as seating is concerned. Um, I think Dwaynesburg might have fallen a little lower than I anticipated, but all in all, I mean, it's all pretty straightforward if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, well, if they've got to be below, if we look at where the WACs are above them and say they have to be below what
Galway and
Burn
Mayfield and OESJ, yeah.
and OESJ and Galway and Mayfield, and that's kind of, I think we're going to talk about this maybe a little bit more so when we get to Class B with a certain situation, but yeah, it kind of puts you in a situation where you're not going to stick like 6 WACs in a row together. And Warrensburg's an interesting 10 because Warrensburg as a 10 has the guard play might be kind of their downfall or whatever, but that's where it's kind of just like your more small school Adirondack League athlete sort of thing. But they've got one of the best forwards out of this Class C group in Ellie York, which everything goes through her. So yeah, I mean it's a pretty cut and dry like grouping of games and grouping of seeds.
And this is a Warrensburg team. Let's not have them sneak up on you at all. Because this is a Warrensburg team that has, the 6 seed Whitehall. They beat them at the end of the year, 47-41. This is a team that hung close with Spa Catholic not too long ago, only lost by 6 at Spa Catholic. They only lost by 9 to a Lake George team at home right before Christmas. So this is a team that can compete with some of those teams that are higher up in this bracket. So, don't be shocked if you see Warrensburg come out there and be the team that Stillwater plays in that round of 8 in the quarterfinals later in the week on Friday. So I definitely speak to what you're saying about Warrensburg there. We're going to skip these for now because they are by far the most intriguing and most talked about brackets. So we're going to save that for last. So we're going to move on to Class A here, a bracket that also, was intriguing just because of the way things laid out. The top half, Albany Academy, they are getting a bye into the quarters as the 1 seed. They'll play the winner of one of the play-in games being done tonight. RCS, they're hosting Cohoes in the 8-9 play-in. Meanwhile, Holy Names and Glens Falls will be the 4-5 quarterfinal being played Thursday night at Albany Academy. So a neutral site for them, although, obviously Holy Names has played there earlier in the year, having played a home and home with Academy. And then bottom of the bracket quick, BP, the 2, they'll get the winner of the other play-in game, the 7-10 game, Ichabod hosting Lansingburg tonight. And then the 3-6 already set up Chalmont will take on Scotia Glenville at BP's gym on Thursday. Overall, just your impressions, Academy getting the 1. This is something that we both had discussed and pretty much expected just because, not just because of comparing the quality of opponent that Academy plays in the Colonial Council, particularly facing Catholic High twice, LaSalle twice, and Holy Names twice, but also just the strength of that massive undertaking they had in their out-of-league schedule, whether it's Columbia, Shaker, Aquinas, just all in all, the undertaking they took there, that definitely was what rode them into the 1 over BP. Is there anything shocking at all to you about the way things broke down in this seating?
No, that's like you said. You brought up kind of all the things that matter when you go into the seating meeting, with the resume and the strength of schedule and league placement and so on and so forth. I like to deal, and this isn't necessarily how things will always go about in these sorts of rooms, because it's not like everybody has a chance to get to see everybody. But I like to deal an eye test. That's my personal thing. Eye test. I watch all of them. Eye test. Yeah, Academy's the one, right? So that was kind of, yeah, they're the one. We talked about a little last week where we were thinking about the whole holy names, broad Alban, this, that, and then we, kind of going through the Colonial league standings, where we came to the realization of, Shalmott's going to be above Holy Names. Even though Holy Names has the head-to-head on the road, even though nothing against Shalmott, eye test, Holy Names a little better. Not saying that Shalmott could never beat them, but eye test, Holy Names a little bit better of a team. But regardless of that, because of their league standings, which the Colonial might have to try and figure something out a little bit here, because it's a multi-division setup.
Yep.
And I don't quite know their intricacies behind all of it, but with a multi-division setup where there's a clear imbalance between divisions. It can create some anomalies when it comes to the seeding and who finishes and what, however it's done. There may have to be a little bit of tweaking with all of that, which there probably will be. I feel like the Colonial changes all the time with who's in how many divisions do we have? Are we just doing one league? How many times do we play each other? I feel like it changes constantly, but there may have to be another look back at that. But if the league didn't shake out that way, if Holy Names was going to be the higher seeded of the two between them and Shalmott, I thought it could have created some strong, engaging discussion between who's the 2 and who's the 3 with Broad Alban and Holy Names. Maybe it still would have worked out. Broad Alban was a 2, but I think that the conversation would have been there. Probably would have been lively. With Shalmott being above Holy Names, I think it made that top 4 easy.
It's gonna be interesting because I think what's gonna be really interesting is assuming all things play out. And this is not me discrediting Glens Falls because they. I'm not going to go on a limb and say Holy Names is definitively winning against Glens Falls.
No.
But if higher seeding holds out, that now sets up Academy Holy Names Part 3. Part 1 was tight for the first half, and then Alex Leonard blew up in the third quarter. Second game, Holy Names blows a fourth quarter lead, and Academy wins at Holy Names. Round 3, you're back to a 94-foot court like the first matchup when they played at Siena. This time it would be Hudson Valley. The intrigue is there. And you got to assume that those Holy Names players are going to come in a little extra juiced, to say the least, looking to avenge those 2 early season losses. So,
and they got to be careful to not look ahead.
Right, exactly.
Because Glens Falls is tough. They're scrappy. They've had their ups and downs, but a win over Queensbury shows, recent win over Queensbury shows that they've got some stuff figured out. They don't have a comparable size piece for Maggie Vollmer, but they do have comparable athletes in general. So, and again, Mark Gerard always gets them playing run through the wall hard. So they got to make sure to not look ahead.
Okay, moving on to Class AA.
Wait, I'm sorry. And you get that Shalmont Scotia game. Fun little side note.
Yes.
Now maybe Shalmont starters will be able to Scotia will see Shalmont starters for the entirety of that game because they saw each other right before Christmas, non-league game. That was the game that one thing led to another, and listening to coach and executing and whatnot. And Shalmont starters did not see the court in the last 18 minutes of that game. So you look back at the Scotia beat Shalmont at Shalmont. I want to say it was 40-19 or something like that, 40-21. Or it was some score like that right before Christmas. That was Shalmont starters did not touch the court for the last, or pardon me, I think a starter played because I think they only have 9 kids, but 4 of them did not see the court for the last 18 minutes of that game. So now we'll get to see it with starters versus starters for 32.
Okay, on to AA. In talking with Mark Bubniak during the live stream we had back on Friday, the real one of the questions not involving Class B was the splitting of hairs that they were doing in trying to figure out who the 1 seed should be in AA between Columbia and Catholic Central, and ultimately they landed on Columbia being the 1 and Catholic Central the 2. So before we get into the bracket, that's basically the conversation we were having too, trying to figure out which direction they go. And I was in the department of, I mean, you couldn't go wrong either way. I mean, either way, you're going to have your detractors and disagreement from the supporters of the opposing school. But in my mind, I don't think they would have gone wrong either way they went here.
Yeah, I don't either. The one thing that I will say is how the AAA's landed, how we just discussed with Albany beating Shen late in the regular season and kind of locking in the 3 over Shen's 4, potentially making those semifinals more interesting. In a way, I'm not going all in on this, but in a way, I think it goes the other way with this. Because now the way Averill Park is playing, and now they have Kaylee back, and they just got to that. They just put up 60-something on 62 on Shen. So maybe we have a little something here for when they, assuming they handle Niski, they get to see Columbia. Maybe they got a little something at this point. But that's a game. I know that they beat Columbia 50-48 or whatever it was at the beginning of the season. 50's not beating Columbia right now. 54. I think you have to get in the 60s to beat Columbia. So maybe they have a little something now. But I thought that if the matchups flipped, I thought if Bethlehem was playing Columbia and Catholic High was playing Averill Park, I thought that just the way basketball being a game of matchups, I thought the way that the matchups lined up, if they flipped, we would have had 2 bangers of semifinal games. Now I'm not so sure. Bethlehem's been playing very well of late, but I think the Catholic High is just a bad matchup for them. And they could prove me wrong. and I would love for them to prove me wrong, because that is, out of the next 3 weeks, the maximum of 7 days that I'm going to be spending in Section 2. One of them is going to be Double A semifinal day. So I hope that I do get 2 really good ones out of this. But I think that the Catholic has a bad matchup for Bethlehem, and I think that Averill Park would be more suited to play Catholic. I think that they're more suited to play Catholic High than they are to play Columbia.
Well, diving into the bracket itself, as you can see, Columbia the 1. They'll get the winner of the 8-9 matchup being played tonight at Troy High. Troy hosting Amsterdam, which is intriguing in that you got 2 young teams, one coming through a Suburban Council schedule, the other a Foothill schedule. Amsterdam setting up challenges themselves, though, in the fact that they had their holiday showcase during the Christmas break. They went down to Brooklyn during the extended Martin Luther King holiday weekend. So to me, a very intriguing 8-9 matchup. And then, as you can see, the 4-seed Averill Park, they'll get the winner of the 5-12 being played tonight at Niskayuna, who will be hosting South Glens Falls. Bottom half.
Don't write that one off either, honestly. I know it's a 5-12, but don't write. South High has not been playing like a 12 lately.
Correct. South High, if I remember correctly, they just upset Queensbury, didn't they? Or am I off on that one?
They beat Amsterdam. I think they
That's right. That's what
ran
I'm
with
thinking. Okay.
Queensbury. But Kate McDonough's back healthy, really giving them a lot. Like, don't quite it's South High. They're not loaded. You know, Kate McDonough's the only one that's really like a basketball player, but they do have athletes. So I get 7-13 and below, but they've had ups. You know, Glens Falls just whooped them recently. Like, you know, there's a lot of those, right? But don't quite write them off.
And then that bottom half, we mentioned Catholic Central being the 2. They'll get the winner of Queensbury Mahonison being played tonight at Queensbury. That's the 7-10. And then Bethlehem, they come in as the 3 seed. They won't host, but they'll play the winner of the 6-11 matchup tonight, Boston Spa against Burnt Hills Boston Lake, where I know if you look at just the sheer numbers, people are probably disappointed in how Burnt Hills Boston Lake has gone about the season, but these are 2 teams that are familiar with each other, and I wouldn't put it past either team winning, quite honestly, because Burnt Hills, yes, they're young, yes, they're still learning, but you know, as much as I like Boston Spa, they're not necessarily a world beater by any means. So to me, this could be another position where you see the lower seeded team win. And at least for me, I don't know what your thoughts are. It wouldn't terribly surprise me too much, quite honestly, just because of the potential that does sit there with BHBL.
First off, I realized I had a Freudian slip. I think I said Kate McDonough. I meant Charlotte McDonough. I was just looking at St. Anselm stuff. Charlotte's older sister, Kate, being on the St. Anselm team, so that was fresh in my mind. But Charlotte McDonough was South High, not Kate. I think I slipped up. But yeah, I mean, and Burnt Hills Boston Spa is a just natural rivalry-ish sort of thing, right? You know, just 2 teams a few minutes apart on Route 50. So there's a certain level of throw it out the window when you have that sort of situation. Yeah, Burnt Hills is they've struggled this year. That I'm not overly surprised. It's you lose Tegan Keene to prep, and that's kind of the piece that makes all the other ones fit. So it has been a struggle for them, but they have pieces. They played Boston Spa earlier this year, and I think it was moderately close. Let's see. Yeah, slow start, -9 in the first quarter, ended up losing by 12. But um that's one of those. Boston Spa's a little better. They're a little deeper. They're a little older. Not a little older, they're a lot older. But there's not a massive difference there. And again, rivalry game, a lot of familiarity. You can kind of throw records out of the window. You can throw past stuff out of the window on that. I've played in those sorts of games before, and in my past life, where a sectional quarterfinal rivalry game where it really is true. Like, you can kind of throw everything else out the window.
Okay, let's move on to Class B. Yeah, wild. There's been a lot of opinions about this bracket. Let's just start from the very top, because you can see the 1 seed. I'm still in a little bit of shock about it, not quite as much as I was on Friday. But I'm still mentally trying to piece together the puzzle that led to this working out the way it did. I mean, obviously, once you put Voorheesville 1, that pretty much sets up the way everything else lays out. I guess the thing that's most confusing to me is I'm not understanding how you stacked the 4 seeds the way they did. Because you basically put it so you have 2 potential, don't want to get ahead of myself, but you potentially have, oh wait, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. Because I forgot Cooksaki fell to the 5. But yeah, the
You're talking
potential
about league. You're talking about league opponents in semifinals, right?
Yeah.
I think what they did was
Which isn't that bad, because I mistakenly my head for some reason had Cooksaki as the 3, and I forgot Mechanicville's the 2, so Catskill's the 3. So it's not that bad now in the grand scheme of things, now that I really think about it. But no, it's this is what happens though when you try to balance 3 leagues in one class, because you're dealing with 3 different sets of conference rankings that are coming out of I mean, I don't know how to speak to necessarily how they rank in Wasserin. I don't know if it's just straight across the board, just the way it looks, but I know the way their point system works in Patroon is wacky a little bit. At Colonial Council, it's 2 versus your division, and then only 1 against all your non-divisions within Colonial Council. It's a weird balancing beam act you have to play. And then once you get the tops from those 3 conferences, then you're trying to go, okay, now let's go from there and try to figure it out and balance it out. Just I don't know. It turned out a little wacky, and the fact they picked Voorheesville over Catskill or Mechanic. Well, let's just say Catskill, because no offense, eye test for both of us this year, we by no means thought Mechanicville was in the running for the 1. Although now, since they're the 2, I guess maybe they were. I don't know. Can you provide any insight on what you think was going on with that?
Insight, maybe not. But my instant reaction when I saw the bracket was eye test. Oh, okay. We threw it out and we rock with the eye test. Because if you've seen all of okay, I've seen Voorheesville in person. I'm going down the list. I've seen Voorheesville in person. I've seen Mechanicville. I've seen Catskill. I've seen LaSalle. I've seen Coxsackie. I've seen Tamarack. I've seen Cobleskill. I've seen Corinth. I've seen Watervliet. I have not seen Greenville in person yet this year. So the top 9 seeds, I've seen them all live. If you tell me to pick a winner out of those 9, I'm going to say Voorheesville. From what just eye test, I'm going to say Voorheesville out of those 9. Is it because I think that they are the best team, quote, most talented, best players, but whatever? In some essence, sure, not necessarily. Like, that's not necessarily the road that I'm thinking. I go back to the phrase that maybe people think I overuse, but it's freaking real. Basketball is a game of matchups. And I look at these other teams, Mechanicville, Catskill, LaSalle, Coxsackie to an extent, especially you get through those 5. What I'm looking at is a group that's devoid of having more than one ball handler. Voorheesville pressures the bejesus out of you. And they don't do it with zone pressure where you're able to create passing angles. If you have some sort of knowledge of scheme and positioning and the man-to-man, mano-a-mano, slide, cut off the ball, make him change direction, slide, turn the ball handler, back taps. It's a style of play that if they stay out of foul trouble is going to be difficult for every other Class B team to withstand for 32 minutes. Now they have to be able to hit shots to score enough points, and they've kind of been up and down in that sense. The only thing that maybe surprised me in the sense of Voorheesville not getting the 1 is the Colonial is the toughest league out of all of the Class B leagues, and it ain't that close. So you get the strength of schedule. You get to play against you're playing against the A's and the double A's and this and the academies and the Catholic Highs and the Chalmonts and this and that. The one thing that Voorheesville didn't do to me is they didn't get that signature win. And when we were talking about how this stuff was all going to work out over the last couple of weeks, when they had that run when they were playing against, I'm going to pull up their schedule so I don't sound like an idiot. But it was, they had like Troy and Chalmont again and a group of games like that. And my thought was all they got to do is pick up 1 win. And I think they're the one. It was between 1 win between at Chalmont, home against Chalmont, Holy Names, and at Troy. I thought all they got to do is pick up 1 of these wins, and they're golden. To me, they're golden for the 1. And they lost all 4 of them. They were all single-digit games. They were all competitive for 32 minutes. But that was the only where I was like a little surprised. Like, I figured they were at least going to have to just snag 1 of those wins. But from having seen the top 9 seeds live, eye test, I think Voorheesville presents as the most difficult matchup across the board for all of them, with just the ability to pressure the ball, create chaos, turn you over, make the style of game the way that they want it to be. So That was my first thought, because going back, eye test. So I'm like, oh, eye test, Voorheesville's the one. This makes sense. It's not necessarily the way that I thought it was going to go. I thought that I was incorrect. I thought Catskill was going to end up the 1 seed. But Voorheesville being the one, just from what I've seen on the court, makes sense. Also, probably not a terrible thing for Catskill. Just takes the eyes off of them a little bit. Just allows them to kind of keep grinding their way. Other bracket thoughts for me. So again, Voorheesville at the 1, and how we went. So 2 different things. Number 1, it's kind of how they set it up was you have, I think, even though, yes, Catskill's on one end, Coxsackie's on the other end, I think what's been created is a pretty low likelihood of seeing a league matchup in the finals. They did that by creating a relatively decent likelihood for league matchups in semifinals. There's a good chance that you get Voorheesville LaSalle in a semifinal. LaSalle's got to get through Coxsackie. Voorheesville's got to handle their end, and B is all we're talking small margins here between teams, so it's not like Voorheesville can just not show up and walk their way into a semifinal or a final. So, but there's a strong possibility of a Colonial Council matchup in a semifinal on the top half. And if you ask me, I think there's a decent chance of getting a Wazern matchup in the semifinal on the bottom half. The potential matchup that I got my eyes on is Catskill Tamarack in a 3-6 quarterfinal. I think that's, and again, that's a nothing against Catskill sort of thing. It's going back to basketball being a game of matchups. I think that is a tricky matchup for Catskill. Going up against Caleb Bedoin, who is arguably the best guard in this field. I'm pretty high on lead guards in playoffs, and she's arguably the best lead guard of the bunch. And they kind of match scrappiness. They match athletes outside of Ava Edmond, but they're a physical group, and they match the ability to grind things out in the 30s and 40s. So I think that's a low margin for error each way sort of game, but I got my eye all over that. Like, I think Tamarack at the 6, I think Tamarack being at the 6 worked out better for them than being almost anywhere else, because I think they match up more reasonably with Catskill than they do with a couple of the other higher seeds. And then let's just say they do it. Let's say they make it to the semifinal. Let's say Mechanicville makes it to the semifinal. That's a round 3 semifinal against a team that's beat you twice by 1 point. So if you're not going to have a little fire in the belly for that one.
I know I'm going to sound like a little bit of a homer doing this, but I have to argue one thing here. And there are going to be people out there who watch and listen to this podcast that are going to think I'm absurd and complain about something like this, but I'm going to do it anyways. As somebody who's seen just about as many teams in this bracket as you have, but is at least familiar with every team in this Class B bracket, on behalf of Johnstown High School, I'm a bit offended they put them at the very bottom of the bracket. And I'm not just saying that because I feel like they got, for lack of a better phrase, a bit screwed into the Catskill 3-14 matchup. But if I'm going again by eye test, you can't tell me, if you're somebody who has seen all these teams and you put them side by side, you cannot tell me Johnstown is worse than Hoosick Falls, Schuylerville, and I'd even argue Chatham. Just again, just eye test. This is a team that I get it. They're a rebuilding program, so the reputation is not exactly very glowing as of right now. And that this is the first time they've won any games since the 21-22 season. I get it. But if you're going eye test, and to me, I'm a little shocked that Tom Galvin, who is the league rep for the Western Athletic Conference, that there was no. Again, I know I'm fighting for the very bottom seat of the entire bracket, but I just kind of get taken aback that a team that has progressed like they have from the last 2 years to this year has players leading the way that are young, like a sophomore guard in Peyton Nigro, a sophomore swing player in Juliana Kohout, their lone senior Molly Wilcox, Sajeda Montesor plays as basically Ale Powell Light, the way she comes off the bench and provides defensive effort. To me, if I'm sitting in, and this is something I've discussed with one or two people from Johnstown already, I'm like, how much did we really have to prove and improve? How much did we really have to improve for you to understand the steps we've taken at this point? And again, this is me getting on my soapbox about, and I know you're gonna be like, well, you announced them all year. But I'm familiar with all these teams because I have to for this podcast and because I'm just, I can't help it. I'm a Section 2 nut. Johnstown had no business being put in the 14th seed. So that's my soapbox, my personal soapbox about this. From a non-personal standpoint, I don't care how we break it down. I'm never going to understand Mechanicville being the 2. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I'm not even understand. Like, I get they were in the Washington title game technically with Greenwich, but even that in that regard, I'm still not even understanding how they were top 3 really. I guess it all comes down to the fact that, hey, well, they played Stillwater and Greenwich in their schedule, and Catskill played a Patroon schedule. That's really the lazy way you want to break it down. Sure, go ahead, run with that. Run with that logic. I don't understand it. I really, really don't. But again, to each their own. Yeah, I mean we had Mechanicville on the show before the season started, I believe. But I don't know. I mean, it's a very Jekyll and Hyde team. Even with Tanner Eisman on the floor, they're still very Jekyll and Hyde. I feel like they had an idea of what their identity was coming into the season, and just throughout the season, they found themselves flip-flopping on that identity multiple times. And I'm just, to me, it's just game to game. You don't know if you're going to get the version of Mechanicville that Section 2 committee deemed was good enough for a 2, or if you're going to get a Mechanicville team that really is playing more like a, no offense, but like a 7 or 8 seed, really. It's, I don't know. They're very Jekyll and Hyde, and I don't know. Those are my 2 things from this bracket that I'm utterly confused about. I don't have a problem with Warriorsville being 1. I don't have a problem with Catskill obviously being top 3. I don't have a problem with LaSalle being 4. It's just that 2 slot that is confuzzling me, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, what you described about Mechanicville is basically Class B as a whole to me. I mean, it's just the reality of Class B in Section 2 is, relatively speaking to the rest of the state, it ain't that good. Like you have depth of competitive teams, but again, like I've talked about with my Upstate 20 stuff, the highest ranked Class B that I've had in Section 2 was like in the 15 range. You have a lot of teams that struggle with the consistency. So that's what makes it interesting. when we get into this time of year, where again, beginning of the year, we were talking about who's going to separate themselves. And the answer was no, we're just going to have more teams in the mix. Instead of having someone separate themselves, we're going to have more teams enter the conversation of who can make it out. Whereas other area, like I can point at other areas, other regions, and say like there's some real state level contenders. Like Hornell is a state level contender. Uh, Section 3's got a couple of them that have to duke it out. Bishop Grimes and Marcellus. Section 4's got 4 of them. I just watched Shenango Forks win the stack championship on Friday. Waverly, Susquehanna Valley. They haven't figured it out amongst themselves, but whoever makes it out is a state level contender, and they have their consistency. They've found it. It's just who is better. We have a lot of teams that just haven't found a consistent patch. Like Catskill, who's the one that I've thought out of all of these teams. Again, I'm not saying that they are the best of the group, but they are the team that to me has found that C word of consistency. They've most successfully found the ways to grind out victories over the in 32-minute basketball games. Then they lost to Greenville. Mechanicville, they've had their moments, but they've had a lot of, they've had some round 1 win, round 2 loss, or round 1 this way, round 2 the other way. They give Greenwich a good battle for a quarter, and then Greenwich stomps on them, and it's just we haven't had our. Nobody made a strong case. Can we just say that? Nobody made a strong case.
No, that's certainly fair.
So, and as I thought Catskill maybe had a good, because Chris Quinn is smart, and he won his non-league schedule. He had some Colonial teams, like some lower end Colonial teams, and he got competitive wins out of them. And then the game that really mattered for seeding was the Coxsackie game, and he got that. So, and if they don't lose to Greenville, they're probably the one. But you lose to someone, which, by the way, Greenville really not a 10 to me in this field.
Yeah,
That's an entirely different discussion. That goes back to the seeding procedures, where Greenville beat Catskill, and I don't think they're a 10, but they fell behind Watervliet in Patroon League standings, so they have to be behind Watervliet in sectional seeding. Vliet's the 9, Greenville's the 10. If you throw that out, we're probably like, you could make a case of going back to that 7-10 of Greenville at Cobleskill. You could make a case of even flipping that if you so chose.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. But did anyone make strong, like, hey, they got to be? No, I'm fine with how it worked out. Because I think whether Mechanicville's the 2 and Catskill's the 3, or Catskill's the 2 and Mechanicville's the 3, I think that's a battle either way if they happen to bump into each other. It did avoid the potential of. I'm happier with the thought of Mechanicville. If Mechanicville and Tamarack see each other, I would rather be in the semifinals than in the quarters. So how that worked out, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back, I guess finishing with the point that I started with was, since I think that nobody really made like a strong case, what am I going to lean back on? Eye test.
Right.
I think Voorheesville's the toughest. I think Voorheesville's the toughest out of everybody. How they've come along, how they've bought into what Terrence is coaching. As long as, and they have like a little caveat here. As long as Mia Carmody's healthy, and she's been battling, she was out for a little bit with that ankle thing, and I think that she's kind of, whether she's been in and out with it or it's just causing some issues here and there. But as long as they're healthy, as long as Mia's healthy, because that's their, Mia's their difference between being a 50-something sort of team and a first to 40 team. So as long as she's healthy, I think they're the toughest out with how they defend, the way they defend against what the teams around them, what their weaknesses are.
I know we've been showing this on the screen during the conversation, but just to verbally break it down, Voorheesville, the 1, Mechanicville, the 2, they will be hosting all the quarterfinal matchups in Class B, and they have buys into the quarters. The rest of the 14-team layout, top half for Voorheesville, they'll play the 8-9 winner, Corinth hosting Waterville Heatley. Then LaSalle, the 4, hosting Hoosick Falls. Coxsackie, the 5, hosting the 12, Scholarville. Those are all Tuesday night, the 25th. Also that night, the 7-10 you just mentioned, Cobleskill, Richmondville hosting Greenville. The 3-14, Catskill hosting Johnstown. And the 6-11, Tamarack hosting Chatham. That is all 6 brackets. And that, I think, covers everything. I know you're going to be out and about covering a bunch of stuff all over the place. So, things will be good. Don't forget, at 84 Feet Podcast on X, Twitter, whatever you call it. If you're listening to us on Spotify, like and follow the show on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you know when new episodes pop up. Jeff is at NYS Takeover on the X Twitters, at Empire State Takeover on Instagram, and EmpireStateTakeover.com. If you haven't checked it out already, what are you doing?
Yeah. By the time this goes live, I will have my full Section 2 playoff previews up on the website.
Perfect. And it's also the home of the Upstate 20 rankings he's been doing throughout the season. So just do it. Like Nike says.
If you're worldly and interested in other parts of the state, I'm also doing previews for other sections playoffs. Section 1 was up first as their brackets were released first. Section 4 was posted. Section 3 was posted. 2 is next, and then I have 5 and 6 to knock out. And then I'll probably, as long as I have time later in the week, 7 and 10 were already, or North Country were already at final week. I will spend my Friday and Saturday up in Plattsburgh for Section 7 finals and Potsdam for Section 10 finals. So that's before coming back down for 2's Class D semifinals. So if you're worldly and you're looking at other parts of the state, got that for you. That's up and will be up. And I will be watching with a keen eye as I spend much of this week not here and much of next week not here either.
Yeah, and obviously the key dates for this week for before we hit the weekend, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday being the key dates for Section 2 girls round of 16 games. And then those are the key dates to look into. And then obviously we start digging into quarterfinals Thursday through Saturday. So that's basically the way it all breaks down. And and then like Jeff just mentioned, we start our annual tradition at Hudson Valley in 6 nights from now. Sunday night, March 2nd, for Class D semifinals on that evening. That all being said, it's been episode 46, part 1 of 84 Feet with Cady and Cap. Jeff, be safe. Yeah, just make sure you got enough gas in the vehicle. Don't be a brave soul and try to make it to the next gas station or the next rest stop. Just do your thing, and hopefully, from the sounds of it, less wind to deal with, and less sub-freezing temperatures to deal with this week. So
it's looking okay right now. It's now, granted, it was looking okay on Thursday when I went out to the Delaware League Championships at SUNY Delhi. It was looking okay, and it was looking okay on the radar too. And then you walked outside to 3 inches of fresh snow sitting on the car, and the plows were not ready for it. So I had to take my Corolla through such bustling establishments as South Courtright and Hobart and Stamford and Jefferson and Summit on the way to Richmondville to get on 88 that just had cakes of snow on the ground. So, and no such thing as traffic plow either. It's Thursday night in the woods. There's no traffic. So, yeah, and that wasn't even on the radar. Like, you pull up the radar, it's like, no, clear skies as snow's falling on me. So
I was so surprised that not even our friend Nate Lowe felt prepared for it mentally.
Yeah, he was not ready for it either. We had the same we didn't have the same drive back home, but we started from the same place at Delhi, so it was an interesting first 40 miles or so.
Yes, sir, indeed. Well, be safe out there, and we'll reconvene. Next week to discuss the outlook for everyone in the semifinals and finals, and actually, we'll be previewing D finals at that point, as the semis will be happening the night before. So, yeah, we'll catch you next week, everyone. Goodbye. Adios.